Welcome back to The Rustic Wife. I'm Alana. I'm just about to make a pie for dessert, so I thought this would be a great opportunity to show you how I make my mom's no-fail pastry recipe. It's easy, it's really flaky, and it's really simple to handle. That's the biggest complaint I think I hear from people when they say they can't make a pie, that they can't handle it, it falls apart. Well, this doesn't do that, and it's like I said, it's super easy to handle, and it's flaky and delicious. So I'm going to show you the steps that I use to make it. So I'm going to turn you around and show you right now. So for this recipe, you need 5 cups of all-purpose flour, 1 pound of cold fat. In my case, I'm using shortening, and I cut it up into chunks. It's just easier to blend it in that way. 1 teaspoon of salt, 1 tablespoon of white vinegar, 1 egg. Oh, I need an egg. 1 cup of ice water. I'm just gonna run down to the hen house and get an egg. I forgot I don't have any up in the house here. Just hold this thought. Got my egg. So you also need 1 egg. And I am out of shape because I just ran down to the hen house and back, and I'm out of breath. Okay, so a couple of things about this pastry. It actually makes enough pie dough for about 3 pies. So what I do is once it gets into, like, form it into a log, I just cut it up into discs and use what you need. And then you can just wrap the rest up in plastic wrap, and then you've got some pie dough ready to go in the freezer. So I just find it easier to make a bunch at a time, and we make a lot of pies, and well, I make a lot of pies. What's this wee stuff? The other thing too is you want to make sure you use cold fat. And in my case, like I said, I'm using shortening. You can use lard, you can use a combination of butter, lard, butter, shortening. I just find for this particular recipe, butter made it a little bit too leathery with this particular recipe. There's plenty of all butter pastry recipes out there that are fabulous. Just with this one, I found it just a little bit leathery. So the cold fat, and the cold fat, what that does is when the little bits of fat are in your pastry, it goes into the oven, they will melt and they'll create little pockets, which makes your pastry flaky. That's what causes your pastry to be flaky. And you want to have the liquid ice cold. So I just had ice cubes in mine. So cold fat, cold liquid equals flaky pastry. Okay, so like I had said before, I've got 5 cups of all-purpose flour in here, and then I have 1 teaspoon of salt. Just want to stir that in there, and then I'm going to take my cold fat and I'm going to put it into my flour. I'm using a pastry blender. This is called the pastry blender right here. This just cuts up the fat into the flour. You can use your food processor. Some people just used 2 knives together or mash it with a fork. I like the old school method, and this was James's grandma's, and it's been going for years. So you just want to do this type of motion and kind of cut your cold fat into the flour until coarse, it resembles coarse crumbs. And every once in a while, I just clean the wires off. Just kind of do it like in this motion. So there you go. The mixture looks like coarse crumbs. If you have a few bigger pieces in there, that's fine too. There. That's what it should look like. Okay, next I want to take my ice water and add 1 egg. And a tablespoon of white vinegar to that. Okay, you want to make a well in the center of your fat and flour mixture and pour this in. And then mix it together with a fork. And then it's going to form a dough ball. Okay, so once it gets to this point, you can use your hands to form it into that dough ball, but don't work it, just lightly form it into, you don't want to overwork dough ever. So you've got this log of pastry here. I'm going to show you what to do now. You just want to cut it up into, you'll either get 5 or 6 chunks out of it. I should have been using a better knife than this, but okay, so I've got them divided into pieces, and each one of these will be a top and bottom crust. So I'm just going to wrap 4 of them up and store them in the freezer until the next time I need them. And today I'm going to be doing a double crust pie, so I'll keep 2 out. Okay, I've got my pastry. When you're not using this, if you're messing around in the kitchen, this should be kept in the refrigerator. It should be kept really cold. It keeps it flaky and it's easier to work with. I have some flour for sprinkling on my work surface. I've got a pie plate. I love these old enamel pie plates. They really bake up nicely. And I find if you're going to use a disposable tin foil plate, put it on a cookie sheet, because I find if you just put those disposable ones in the oven, the bottom doesn't bake very well. That's just my experience anyway. And I have my rolling pin. So I'm going to show you how I roll this out. So you just want to sprinkle your work surface here and get your rolling pin. Get some flour on that. And your first piece of pastry. So you just want to roll it out lightly. You want to put enough pressure so it rolls out, but you don't want to cram it onto the counter. It'll stick. So you want to keep on rolling it up onto your rolling pin, and make sure there's always some flour there, and flip it over. Sprinkle a bit of flour there. Roll it out this way. So if your rolling pin gets sticky, just add a little bit more. Just keep doing that until it's rolled out to however big you need it. Just keep flipping it over. And if it tears, just do that. So I'll get my pie plate. And then I just want to roll my pastry onto the pie plate. You can position it however you need to get it in there. Make sure the pastry is sitting right on the bottom of your pie plate. You can also trim a little bit of this off, or if you're going to do just a single crust, you can trim a bit off and then flute the edges, but I'm going to do a double crust, so I'll show you how I do that. So here's the filling for my pie. I didn't show you the steps for this because this was just a video how to make this, but I will tell you the recipe that I'm using. I have got some fruit in the freezer that I wanted to use up, and it is 3 cups of frozen blueberries, 2.5 cups of frozen raspberries, 1 cup of granulated sugar, 1/4 cup of cornstarch, and 2 tablespoons of flour. Mix that together and keep the fruit frozen. I always cook it from frozen. It takes a little bit longer for the juices to make a syrup type of thing for your pie, but it's really tasty. So I'm going to just put this in here. Okay, so when you put that all in there, it's actually going to look like a lot of sugar and flour and cornstarch, but you need all of that to thicken it up. And then I always just take about a tablespoon of butter and cut it up into bits and put it over the top. So I'm just going to roll out the top. It's the same as the bottom. My mom taught me how to make pies, and she was a master. So she taught me how to roll. Okay, so now we're going to put it on top of the pie. Roll it onto your rolling pin. And do the same thing, just roll it over top. And then you can position it if you like. You want to leave enough to crimp, but I take some of it off just because the weight of it drags it down a little bit when I'm trying to crimp it and pulls the crimps out. Okay, that should be good. Keep these scraps. You can roll them out spread it with butter, sprinkle it with cinnamon sugar, roll it up and cut it into little wheel things. My mom used to call them tidbits. My brother and I used to fight over them. Okay, so you want to actually just make sure that that's pushed down onto the edge of your pie plate. And then for crimping, I think I'm going to pull you down a little bit closer here so you can see. Okay, so you want to dip your fingers in flour. Some people call it fluting, crimping. So take your fingers like this and your thumb here, and you're going to have your fingers underneath both layers of pastry right there. And you're going to push that into the little V of your fingers. And go all the way around. This is just one way of doing it. This is how my mom taught me, and it makes it pretty, I think. So to trim the excess off, I'm right-handed, so I take the pie in my left hand and then the knife. I just keep trimming it like this. Okay, again, keep those scraps and just touch up the crimps again. Okay, now you want to vent the pie here because you want to allow the steam to come out when you're baking it. So I just do a little cross here with my knife, and I just kind of cut a little vent hole here. And that's going to allow steam to come up. But I'm going to put an egg wash on the top so it's got a nice sheen on it when it bakes. So for the egg wash, you can just do 1 egg white and 1 tablespoon of cold water. I don't like egg yolk, so that's why I use egg white. You can use a whole egg and water, but then I just brush it over the top. Adds a nice little sheen to it, and then sprinkle it with just a little bit of granulated sugar on the top. I'm gonna put my pie on a baking sheet with parchment paper because this will probably bubble over and you don't want to clean up that mess in your oven. So I've put the pie in the oven at 425 degrees for about 15 minutes, and then I'm going to turn the oven down to 350. That'll go in for about another 50 minutes. So you have to double check the pie crust. When it gets to that point, you may need to add a piece of tin foil around the top just to allow the inside to continue baking and thicken up those juices without over browning your pie crust. So just keep an eye on it around the 45-minute mark. So you can see the outer crust is getting a little bit brown, so I'm going to put a piece of foil over top of that so it doesn't get too dark. So the pie can continue to bake and the edges won't get too brown. So there's all the steps how to make flaky pastry at home, and I hope this video was helpful, and I will see you again next time.